Pushing a button and flicking a lever is nice and all, but sometimes it's helpful to get repeated signals automatically. Guess what I'm talking about today? Clocks are common in Redstone all over, but especially in farms and games. A clock in Redstone is basically just anything that sends out Redstone signals repeatedly, automatically, and usually regularly. There are a ton of ways to make a clock, so I picked out a bunch of somewhat common types of clocks to show off as well as explain how they work. First off, we've got a bunch of quick clocks that process things really quickly, turn on and off rapidly. Starting with comparator clocks. These things work by jamming a high signal strength into the side of a comparator, causing it to drop signal strength and not have that high of a signal strength into the side, making it go back up and down and up and down. This is often pretty good for emptying droppers because it will automatically turn off when the dropper empties out. Next up is a torch burnout clock. These work by causing a torch to rapidly power on and off by powering the block it's attached to, usually just through block above the torch, redstone dust on the block the torch is attached to. That will turn it on and off and on and off real quick. These are fast and cheap and can be good for getting a quick 8 pulses. Otherwise, you can make it more permanent, although it will be pretty loud. And you can't turn them off by just powering the redstone yourself. That way, it's not turning back on. Finally, for this category, we have observer clocks. These are very simple. You can have 2 observers facing each other. Each observer is going to sense when the other updates and emit an output, and they'll just do that repeatedly. You can also have more than 2 observers, just in a cyclical loop. These are simple, pretty small, pretty easy, assuming you have nether quartz. For our next category, we have a bunch of clocks that are easy to set up. They have a little longer of a cycle, but I'd say they're more customizable, and sometimes a longer cycle is exactly what you want. For an especially old one, you have torch clocks. These are really old from the early days of Redstone, and it's just a set of redstone torches powering each other in a loop. It does have to be an odd number, otherwise it settles into one configuration of on and off torches. And they can be cheap, but they're often outclassed by another type of clock that will be coming up directly after. And it's definitely an old design. After that is the outclasser for the repeater clock. It's just a pulse rotating around a set of repeaters. You can change the delay on the repeaters, you can add more repeaters, add less repeaters. They're pretty easy to understand and pretty easy to customize to whatever you need. Finally, here we've got a fader clock. It's a fancy name. It's basically just a pulse extender that turns itself back on with a redstone torch. These can be customized just like the pulse extender it's based on by adding comparators, changing how many redstone dusts there are in the loop. And I will be talking more about pulse extenders in a future video, so if you're curious about that, hold on tight. Now you may be looking at some of these and saying, hey, these all look nice, but I want one with a little more length to it. Well, boy, do I have just the thing. First off, despawn clocks. For this, an item is dropped onto a pressure plate. This turns off a torch. When the item despawns, it turns on the torch and activates a dropper to drop another item. These are really simple. They do have some limits to them, though. They can only do 5-minute gaps because that's how long it takes for an item to despawn. And you are able to run out of items in the dropper, although this one can be circumvented if you just have a farm hooked up to it, just some chickens in a hole or a simple bamboo farm or something. Up next is a longtime classic and one of my favorites personally. We have the hopper clock. A redstone block is put by a hopper. This stops the hopper from pushing things out and lets a hopper next to it push things into it. And then once the pushing hopper empties, the redstone block is pushed over and the roles reverse. And it just keeps doing that. These are pretty easy, pretty simple to set up. Generally, they're my go-to if I need a decently lengthy clock to work with. You do have to watch for the pistons not getting updates because pistons can be annoying sometimes, but overall, hopper clocks are good. Then we have daylight detectors. They're just clocks on their own, basically. You do have to watch for weather, and you do need them to have sky access, but they're pretty easy to understand. You put down a daylight detector, boom. Finally, here we have redstone ore clocks. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, how do you make a clock out of redstone ore? And that would be a legitimate question, and that is a legitimate question. And I'm going to answer that. That's why I'm here. So, redstone ore has the unique ability among ores that if a entity touches it, then it starts glowing, and after some time it stops glowing. If you just sit an entity on top of it, though, you can just repeatedly make it continue glowing. But whenever it stops glowing, or would stop glowing, it reactivates immediately, but an observer is still able to see that. It's still able to see it turn off and on quickly. So, every time it turns off and on, observer pulses, that's a clock. It's compact. You only need a couple blocks of space for it. Unfortunately, it is irregular. It doesn't have a consistent timing to it. It's pretty good if you just want some pulses every once in a while and you don't care too much about the specifics. Like, some farms are good for it, but I don't use it myself. I prefer other methods. It does have its uses, though. Now, one thing that all of these previous clocks have in common, apart from the redstone ore, but redstone ore is weird. Most of these clocks have in common is they have a regular, consistent timing to them. They turn off for a bit, they turn on for a bit, they turn off for the same amount of time, and they turn on for the same amount of time. Now, that's nice and all. That's typically what you want, but me personally, I was making a game pretty recently, and I was thinking, hey, it would be nice to have a clock that changes over time. So I made one. And then for this video, I also made another one. I couldn't really, I'm sure there's other designs out there, but I like designing things. They're fun. So first up, we have what I'm calling a dynamic fader pulser. It's like the fader pulser from before. Remember the one that was just a pulse extender? But now, instead of being powered directly by the redstone torch, it's being powered by a comparator that's being accessed by the redstone torch, basically. And now, because it's being powered by that comparator now, you can change what that comparator is outputting by like hooking it up to a dropper or a barrel, and you can power the dropper on and off periodically, or you can empty the barrel using a hopper or something, and you can just do that, and it'll change the amount of time the clock is on for. Like, it'll change the timing for when it turns on and when it turns off. And I think that's pretty cool. I don't see how it's super useful outside of making games, but I think it's cool. Now, if you really hate comparators, I have bad news because this next design still has comparators, but hopper clocks. Hopper clocks. They're, again, they're pretty nice. And you can take the items out of them gradually using hoppers. This is a design for it I threw up in a short amount of time. It's definitely not the best design out there. I'm almost certain there's better, but I wanted to make one myself because I like designing things. I think it's fun. I think it's a good challenge. Keeps me fresh in the head. And that's all I've got for clocks. Sorry my descriptions and explanations kind of fell apart by the end. I don't really have a good reason for them to. I ran out of stuff to talk about. It's a bunch of clocks. You should know what clocks are used for by now. You just repeatedly turn stuff on and off. There's obviously other clock designs out there. I can't get to all of them. I wanted to limit myself. But if you have any questions, ask them. If you learn something or think I am cool, I guess, you can like the video. I will be continuing to talk about other stuff, so subscribe for that. And apart from that, have fun doing some redstone.